In this presentation, we will take a look at multiple choice questions related to governmental accounting, going through those questions and then practicing test-taking skills with them. First question, format for the government-wide statement of activities, either A, expenses minus program revenues plus general revenues equals net income, B, program revenues plus general revenues minus expenses equals change in net position, C, program revenues minus program expenses equals program net income, or D, expenses minus program revenues plus general revenues equals change in net position. Okay, let's go through this again using the process of elimination. Format for the government-wide statement of activities. First one says we have the expenses minus the program revenues plus the general revenues equals net income. Now this one, you would think normally if you're going from financial accounting, you would think it would be something like revenue minus expenses. But notice we have expenses minus revenue in a few of these answers, so I'm going to keep this one here. The one that I'm going to eliminate this for is the fact that it says net income, which typically you would think that's going to be a for-profit term, the bottom line of the income statement, not usually what we see on governmental accounting, although we have something kind of equivalent to it. So I don't think it's going to be A because of that net income term. B says program revenues plus general revenues minus expenses equals change in net position. So that's going to be the net position is used in the rest of them. So I'll keep that one for now. And then C says program revenues minus program expenses equals program net income. And again, net income doesn't seem like the one. And now we have program revenue and expenses. So I don't think that's going to be the one. Then we have D, expenses minus program revenues plus general revenues equals change in net position. So we're left with D and B, so we're going to keep D and B. Format for government-wide statement of activities, either B, program revenues plus general revenues minus expenses equals change in net position, or expenses minus program revenues plus general revenues equals change in net position. Of the two, intuitively, you would think it would be A, revenue minus expenses, but it's actually the other way around in terms of this report, which is a little bit unusual, so it might not be what you would expect. D is going to be the final answer. Format for the government-wide statements of activities is D, expenses minus program revenues plus general revenues equals change in net position. Let's take a look at the next question. Which is not a category of program revenue on the statement of activities at the government-wide level? A, other program revenues, B, charges for services, C, operating grants and contributions, D, capital grants and contributions. Let's go through this again using the process of elimination. Which is not a category of program revenue on the statement of activities at the government-wide level. So we got the government-wide level as opposed to the funds here. A, other program revenues is not a category, so I'll keep that one for now. B says changes in charges for services. C says operating grants and contributions, and D says capital grants and contributions. Now, you're going to have to be familiar with basically this statement to take a look at this. It's not really totally intuitive if you're going from financial accounting here. These three, B, C, and D, are going to be on the statement. Other program revenues is not one of the categories of program revenue. So A is not going to be the item, or A is the final answer and not the item. B, C, and D are going to be what the sections are. So let's go through final answer, which is not a category of program revenue on the statement of activities at the government-wide level. Final answer, A, other program revenues. Next question, which is not on a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance of a governmental fund? Either A, depreciation expense, B, interfund transfer in, C, revenues from proprietary taxes, property taxes, D, expenditures. Let's go through this again using the process of elimination, which is not on a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance of a governmental fund. So we got a fund now. We're talking about a governmental fund. Remember the fund classes we have. They got the governmental, we've got the proprietary, and we've got the fiduciary. This is going to be the biggest class, and it uses the modified accrual basis. Or in other words, it uses kind of the current activity type of information. So keeping that in mind, we've got depreciation expense, And that is one that relates to capital assets, which aren't typically recorded on, a short-term kind of statement that's looking at current cash flow. So possibly depreciation looks like it could be the one. B says the interfund transfers in. Seems like we can have an interfund transfer. That sounds familiar, and that seems familiar. So C says revenue from property taxes. So tax revenue, you would think that would be something that could be recorded in the funds. And then D says expenditures. Now, we have the two terms expenditures and expenses. Which ones are going to be used for the fund? Expenditures would be there. Expenses would be another answer that you would think they might put out there, given it's going to be the governmental funds on a modified accrual, therefore no expenditures, but expenses being the term. Here, however, a little bit more difficult one possibly. It's going to be the depreciation related to capital assets, which aren't there because we got current flows. So final answer, which is not on a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances of a governmental fund, A, depreciation expense. Next question, which is not on a governmental fund balance sheet? Either A, accounts receivable, B, inventory, C, bonds payable, or D, vouchers payable. Let's go through this again using the process of elimination. Which is not on a governmental fund balance sheet. So we're talking about the fund balance sheets again, and that's going to be the ones that are going to be more short-term in nature. So we're going to have, you would expect then current assets, current liabilities. So we've got A, accounts receivable. They could be there because it's current. You would think that's something that could be current. Inventory, that's, less current, but I think it still could be in the current assets. So typically, and then we got C, the bonds payable. Now, it could be a current bonds payable, but bonds payable is typically something that's going to be more of a long-term liability. And then vouchers payable, which should sound familiar as similar to accounts payable. Again, kind of a short-term current liability we would expect. So between B and C, which is not on the government fund balance sheet, you would think that of the two, the bond is probably more long-term liability as opposed to the inventory, which might be supplies or more short-term type of supplies, and therefore the bond is less likely to be there. Final answer C, bonds payable.